Welcome everyone to this special virtual budget meeting. This meeting of Woodstock City Council has been called for the purpose of consideration of the 2021 Revenue Fund budget. Today's date is Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021, and the meeting is for information and discussion purposes only. No action will be taken as the revenue budget approval is scheduled for the regular meeting of council on March 18th, 2021. This meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238, subsection 3.3 of the Municipal Act and Section 16.6.24 of the City of Woodstock procedural bylaw. This meeting is being live streamed in accordance with the city's YouTube channel, and a recording of the meeting will also be posted on the city's website following the meeting. An agenda of this meeting can be found on the agendas, meetings, and minutes page of the city website. Councillors will be raising their hands in view of their webcam when requesting to speak. If a member of council is disconnected or having technical difficulties, we will take a recess in order to attempt to rectify the issue. If technical difficulties exist that prevent the meeting from continuing, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later time. If a councillor needs to leave the meeting at any time, they're requested to inform the deputy clerk. And tonight we have quite a few departments. So this is the first of two special budget meetings, which will be followed by our regular city council meeting, where we'll have some presentations from other boards, and then we'll follow it up at the second meeting in March with motions and additions and whatnot as council goes through all of this detail. So I'll ask all of the councillors to now turn on their webcams if available. Welcome. And any disclosure of conflict of interest? And seeing none. So we have some budget notes to go over, and then we'll start right into the department line by line and page by page. So and who would like to go over those budget notes? Do we have a presentation on that? There's our CAO, David Creary. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, we do not have anything prepared for this. This was essentially what was delivered to council at the meeting last Thursday. If there are any questions of council before we begin the more department by department detailed budget deliberation, we'd be happy to address those questions at this point. Otherwise, I suggest we get on with the department presentations.
Turn this mic back on. There we are. Any questions of council so far before we go through? Go ahead, Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, through the mayor to, I guess, David Creary and maybe Patrice Hilderly. Just generally, in basic terms, the increase in taxation possibilities to the city of Woodstock based on new construction, new residential versus what we had in 2020. Because obviously you could sort of say it's going to be an increase in X percentage overall, but some of that overall is getting consumed naturally by new construction as well. So just in basic terms, what we're looking at there. I know that's part of the notes from last Thursday.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Schadenberg's question. The budget takes into account the additional taxes that are derived from new construction growth in the city within the administrative services portion of the budget, and it's in page 1, so we'll be reviewing that in detail this evening. It comes in the form of what's classified as the account is called additional taxes, and this is additional assessment, taxation from additional assessment that occurs in the year. And this particular year, there's an estimated increase of 100,000 over prior year, which reflects the increasing pace of construction, the growth that's going on in the city. Overall, the assessment increase as a result of new construction is estimated to be about 2.3%. That assessment has the effect of mitigating the tax rate increases that's the result of this budget process.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, thank you very much. So our first presentation tonight, we'll begin with human resources. So within the package that we all have, that's pages 88 and 89, and we have Mr. Laird Crooks with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. With Council's indulgence, I'd like to go through a very brief presentation prior to going through the line by line. And I would ask Council, as for each of the slides I have, there's very few, any questions you have, please ask them as we go through. One second. There we go. As I typically like to do with Council is go through, and this is more what you will see throughout all of the revenue budgets for each of the departments. That way, if there are any major increases, decreases, you have an idea of why that's driving each of the individual departments. But if we start with wages and salaries for the admin and QP groups, since the collective agreements for both of our QP unions expired at the end of last year, we're still in negotiations, so we don't know what that increase will be. So we budgeted at the previous year level in that respect. The salary and wages for fire, that's what was awarded through the interest arbitration. So that is something that we do know. And without going through line by line, if we look at each of the other, like the health benefits or employment insurance, you're going to see any of the changes this year are actually quite moderate. Maybe one of the ones that does stand out is the CPP decreasing by 2.3%. That's corporately, it'll decrease by, we assume 2.3%. And that's based actually on the reduction in part-time hours due to the fact that we have fewer programs running. So that's the reason for that. But as I said, other than that, you're going to see there's no significant changes in this. If we go and look at the highlights of the 2020 human resources budget, we actually were almost $21,500 over budget. That's roughly 3% of the total budget. The biggest driver of this was employee and labor relations. We actually had 2 arbitrations. We had a number of other legal issues to deal with, but the reality is it was a fire interest arbitration that drove actually the complete overage and even more so. That was very expensive for the city. The accounts that were under budget were recruitment. Obviously, conferences and seminars, anything done now is done virtually and not quite nearly as expensive. Health and safety was under, and one of the drivers with that was with respect to, we like to do PDPs, which is like an ergonomic assessment of work, but it's something where unfortunately you have to get up close and personal, and so we were not able to do everything we wanted to do in those respects. For 2021, if we're looking at roughly a 3.5% increase, that's around $24,000. The big ask here, sorry, before we get to the big ask, because of the results we've had over the last couple of years with the employee and labor relations, which is really legal fees related to that, what we're looking at doing is creating a reserve fund that if there's anything left over of the $50,000, we'll start to build up a reserve fund so we don't have the extremes, highs and lows that we've had over the last few years. The biggest increase in ask for the human resources budget this year is an ask of an extra $34,000 to bring up the consultant services to $50,000. And that's because we feel that there's a much need for the administrative, the non-union job review, and along with that, a market assessment. And the market assessment, we think, will likely even bring in some of the more technical positions within the hourly group. So that's really what's driving the increase in that. That's the end of the presentation. So if there's questions on that before we go through the line, I'm more than willing to listen.
Thank you. Questions of council? Seeing none, go ahead. So we're at page 88. Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Laird. Just looking at your subscriptions and memberships, it just went up slightly. I was just curious, are a lot of those electronic so that they can be shared amongst the staff, or do they come in paper form? I know it says memberships as well too, so maybe it's more membership oriented.
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, yes, it is more membership. In fact, it's almost exclusively membership. And we are seeing an increase in that. And I think you may see that in other budget lines as well.
Just if I can continue on, is that just a membership for yourself, Laird, or is that for you and your staff, or how is that?
All four of us have memberships. Three of us in the HR side have memberships in HR groups, and the health and safety manager has membership in safety associated groups.
Thank you. Further questions of council? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight before we move on to the next presenter?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, council.
Thank you very much. Sorry, get my mic on. Next up, we have communication and special events, and we have Mr. Brad Jansen, and he's joining us, and this will be pages 94 to 98, and we have a presentation to start as well. Welcome. Sorry, we'll get you to double click there again on the mic.
In the bottom left-hand corner, uncheck mark, mute.
There we go.
Oh, my apologies.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I have a brief presentation since there wasn't a whole lot of activity in the special event part of my calendar year, but yes, we'll start with marketing, I thought. Slide 2. We started the year with a new look on the magazine cover with a fresh masthead, font, and style. That is the handiwork of Spencer Holman, who's been on board for a little better than a year now. What's on Woodstock celebrating its 23rd year of providing Woodstonians the information they need to know on what's happening in our community. Since we've been forced to navigate through the pandemic, the magazine has been an even more valuable marketing tool that complements our online information campaigns by directing our leadership to the most up-to-minute and relevant sources, namely the city web and social media platforms. Here's a few examples of our attention-grabbing covers that have been delivered directly to the homes in Woodstock over the course of the year. What's on Woodstock, the magazine has been an integral tool by which to disseminate key messaging via editorial, the mayor's message, and of course imaging. The visuals have been very effective in the social distancing, wearing of masks, and washing your hands campaigns. As Woodstock expands, so does the reach of the magazine. The most recent issue will be distributed to 21,300 homes via Canada Post. Based on an average household of 4 people, over 85,000 impressions are realized each month, providing city departments and advertisers with tremendous value and coverage. In addition, the magazine continues to be valuable or available in full on the city website in an accessible format for the visually impaired. The 2020 editorial content also focused on proactive messaging, covering topics such as, but not limited to, new bus routes and fuel saving prevention, downtown issues and answers, patio pop-ups, parks and trails, fire prevention, and water rates. We also took the opportunity to introduce new members of our management team via mini bios. And since dealing with the pandemic, we have aggressively utilized alternate marketing opportunities to control and steer the message to make sure the citizens of Woodstock know where to turn for the most up-to-date information. Now, from the outset of the pandemic, we dedicated the landing page of the city website as a device by which the public can easily find the information they're looking for at a local level, regional through the Southwestern Public Health Unit, and provincial sites. At the click of a mouse, residents can find the information in an easy to navigate departmental listing that is updated regularly. And because of the fluidity and frequency of incoming information, we also established an FAQ. We also developed a consistent and reliable social media presence with Facebook and Twitter, and the cooperation and attention to detail from every department has allowed us to provide a concise, consistent, and cohesive approach to disseminating the information most requested by our residents and stakeholders. We continue to visit and compare models used by other municipalities, and we stack up favorably in our approach. Here's a look at the banner that is currently on display on the side of the Dairy Capital House. That just went up yesterday. This is the illustration board at the corner of Wilson and on Wilson at the bend there, just beyond the tracks. And that was up for a couple of months in a partnership that we made with the people that control that particular billboard. And the series of homegrown celebrities gained a lot of attention with a combined viewing of over 15,000 the first month, and they were all more than happy to help out. We give them a recorded message. They sent it to me via phone, and we got it up, and it garnered a lot of support. And that was from the very beginning of the pandemic, when there was a lot of emphasis, as there is now, with the social distancing, washing your hands, and wear a mask. Special events. We started the year off on the right foot by orchestrating a very successful and fun long service awards banquet. That was in January at Goff Hall. And then it happened. Unfortunately, we were forced to cancel the lion's share of our traditional special events scheduled for spring, summer, and early fall. These are the ones that fell by the wayside. And we took our lead from other municipalities around, and when events such as the exhibition in Toronto fell by the wayside, that was late spring, the Western Fair, and we knew that it wasn't in the cards that we would be able to put on anything that solicited social gatherings. So you can see everything from Arbor Day, the Easter egg hunt, Woodstock Day, Art in the Park, Calapalooza, and so on. The 2020 special events, we had the Long Service Awards, as I had mentioned. The Ornament Exchange. Well, we'll start with the Remembrance Day. After a series of meetings with the Legion, we convinced them that it was important to the community to recognize those that serve and have served by holding an indoor invite-only Remembrance Day ceremony at Goff Hall that was televised live on Rogers TV. It went very well and without a hitch. And as you can see, we replicated the imagery of the cenotaph there, and it looked very good in the hall and televised very well. And in the latter part of November, we orchestrated our popular ornament exchange at Goff Hall following health board recommendations and protocols such as contact tracing, limited participants at a time, as well as social distancing. We witnessed even more participants, which I chalk up to the pandemic purge, because we seem to have gotten that many more gently used Christmas items that we sat on for a week as per the recommendations from the health board, and then the shopping on the following weekend. So simply because of the uncertain times we are in, and when vaccines might be readily available, and the continued and anticipated restrictions on social gatherings, as well as the comfort level of the public, it has been decided to once again cancel this year's major events for spring and summer. That being said, I still hold out hope to possibly orchestrate a major fireworks display, perhaps over the Pittock Reservoir, as it would be a much more manageable venue to have people distanced. Toyota provided their traditional $10,000 donation, and the fireworks from last year have been in storage. So that'll be a continued conversation as we see what we're up against. And also hoping that we might have something to celebrate in a late summer or early fall. Just kind of testing the waters. We sent out letters to all the marching bands that traditionally participate in the Victoria Day Parade to see if there would be any interest in participating in a parade in maybe mid to late September. All the entertainment venues and stuff, they've been put on hold as well, so they're eager to participate. And we thought maybe if it was in the cards and we feel confident in doing so, perhaps we can celebrate and thank our frontline and essential workers. And to this point, the response has been, like, as I mentioned, very positive. And if we're able to do it in a safe manner, at that time, we'll make a proper proposal to council at the appropriate time. So that is my my presentation.
Thank you. Questions of council? Okay, so we've got several pages of detail here, starting with the page 94, the marketing admin, and then some of the different activities as we move forward, from winter lights and beautiful awards. Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Jansen, how many What's on Woodstock magazine issues are there per year? Is it 9? Is it 10? How many are you publishing per year right now?
We're currently providing 9 copies a year, and we did so once we brought on Canada Post, because our method by distribution. I've got a whole IT team here helping me out. I'm at Ann's desk, as you probably tell. There we go. There we go. So we do 9 editions. So we doubled up on January, February, because it was kind of a slow news cycle in those months. And then we have a kind of what we call a summer fun activity guide, which is June, July, and then the traditional November, December issue. So we have 9.
Thank you. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Just on the What's on Woodstock magazine, has it been sent out yet? I just haven't seen one for February yet.
Yeah, February's, oh, your councillor through to the mayor through Councillor Accioni. Yeah, it should be in your mail. Yeah, double issue. Well, no, it's a double issue. It's January, February, so we're waiting March. Yeah, March will be in the mail.
Oh, okay. So I haven't got one yet this year. I was going to say I haven't seen anything
You should have
yet.
got one at the beginning of the year. You should have got the double issue. Yeah.
I don't recall that truthfully, but okay. All right.
We'll follow that up, because we're in constant contact with Canada Post, and if people aren't receiving it, we'd certainly like to know, because that was kind of the charm of going with them, to make sure that it got in every apartment, every townhouse, every residence in Woodstock.
Yeah, no, I can't think of receiving one myself. Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Brad. Utilizing Canada Post for distribution, has that increased our costs overall? Because before it was an insert with shopping news, correct?
Councillor Fraser, or Your Worship, through to Councillor Fraser. Yes, we were going with the shopping news, and it was determined after they had let that publication go. We used to get it on the Monday or the Tuesday, and then they arbitrarily put it in the Oxford Review, and it was our finding and experience that it was getting lost along with all the other flyers, whereas when it was with the shopper at the beginning of the week, I think the only other flyer or supplement in there was Giant Tiger. So I voiced my displeasure with the gentleman that I deal with from Post Media, and we did kind of an internal survey too with all city staff to see whether they got the magazine, and we found out things such as one side of the street was getting it, the other side wasn't. So we kind of pulled the plug on that. We explored Canada Post. We saved the money on doubling up on a couple of issues, and it is a little bit more expensive, but to that point, we've gained a bigger audience. We've generated a few newer advertisers, but we haven't had a whole lot of advertising because there hasn't been a whole lot to advertise, but it is a little bit more money, but we find that the value is well spent.
Thank you. And Councillor Schadenberg?
I guess just maybe a recap to Mr. Jansen. The Rec and Leisure Guide that comes out twice a year, is that something you do along cooperative with the Parks Department as far as putting together summer camps and everything that's involved in that publication and your department as well?
We do, Councillor Schadenberg, or your worship, through to Councillor Schadenberg. Andrew Norris from Flying Squirrel Media, he has done both he's done the community service calendar, the magazine, for a number of years, even going back to when he worked for Oxford Media Group, and he also does the rec guide as well. There is some crossover, but then it became kind of a standalone when the rec department decided to come out with their hardcover of the publication. But now that they've decided to use that as an online tool, they will use the What's on Woodstock magazine to promote the rec guide and where to find it and when it's going to be available. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Further questions of council? Seeing none. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Brian Connors, our Director of Parks and Recreation, and we'll let you kick off. We've got 3 distinct areas and quite a few pages to go through. So it looks like we'll start with Parks and Recreation, beginning on page 50. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just share the screen right now and go full screen.
No snow on that field.
Not, yeah, it was taken quite a bit earlier than last week, that's for sure. So what the presentation is going to entail is the 2020 highlights, followed by the 2020 metrics for parks and then recreation. Kind of what's happening in parks and recreation, or what has happened in 2020. Then I'll review the net budget compared to the 2020 actual budget. And then I will get into the 2021 base budget for parks, an overview, and then followed by a 2021 base budget recreation overview, and finally, addition to base budget request for consideration. So with that said, I'll get into the highlights for 2020. Even with COVID restrictions and material shortages, most 2020 projects were completed, with the lights of at Cowan Sports multiplexed field going up just last week. Some of the highlights include the opening of the pedestrian walkway over Pittock Dam. This was with the help of the engineering department. The finishing the multi-purpose field at Cowan Sportsplex, the redevelopment of Yonkers Field C, the soccer pitch at Cowan Sportsplex. Both of these were done by park staff. This wasn't outside contractors doing the work. The park staff did, which saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. The completing of the final phase of the Ludington Park, the redevelopment of Southside Gazebo Gardens, adding an extra 2.93 kilometers of trail construction east of Shanna Larson. Again, this was park staff constructing the trail system. Completing the first phase of turning the Reeves Hall into Reeves Courts. Building a second temporary cricket pitch on Southwood Sports Field. The community complex, finalizing a title sponsor, and redeveloping a boat ramp at Pittock Reservoir. As far as the parks metrics goes, the parks budget covers 53 parks and parkettes, consisting of 865 acres, 69 sports fields and courts, 4 acres of overpass and corridors, 4 trails, now consisting of 17.5 kilometers of trails, and 12 storm management ponds. The metrics for the recreation, I'm going to leave the actuals up in front of everyone to look at. However, I will, to give you a sense, I will give you the percentages based from 2019 to 2020. So this will give people a sense of how much participation has happened in 2020. And really there was as people could figure it was a really, really bad year as far as participation and revenue. So Reeves Hall Community Complex foot traffic was down 65%. The youth ice rental was down 50% year over year. Adult ice rentals were down 73%. Southside aquatic lessons were down 78%. Southside aquatic public swim was down 53%. Southside aquatic rentals were down 63%. Lions Pool revenue, this is the only time I can say this, was up 1.9%. Camp revenues were down 99.8%. Recreational programs were down 95%. Cowan Park sports field rentals were down 60%. And Cowan Park hall and gym rentals were down 53%. So all in all, COVID really did a number on the recreational side of the ledger. And just this is always a slide I put up, which is the FAIR program, and much like the recreational side, it did not get much use, and this has mainly to do with our summer camp program was canceled due to COVID, and that's where the bulk of the use for the fee assistance program comes in. So this next slide is basically a lot of what has happened in recreation that isn't quantifiable by the metrics. So there was a lot of planning, changing of plans, and then more planning to accommodate the change. Indoor full-time facility staff were redeployed to outside workforce during the shutdown. All part-time staff, all indoor part-time staff were laid off for the most part. As provincial health units changed operational status of our community, the rec staff ensured that we operated within safe guidelines, which often meant getting clarification of unclear documents and then working out best practices from there. Recreation and Parks Department also ran some additional online content for the community, as well as there was Parks moved several additional staff to deal with the trail. There was a lot more people using our trails this year than ever before, and that meant a lot more garbage and refuge, both inside the trails and at the trailheads and the garbages. So that was an area of added focus. This slide shows the high-level net budget to net actuals. Despite all the changes in 2020, staff were conscious to work within the budgets and be aware of the diminished revenues, particularly in the rec side. This chart shows that they were able to quickly downsize their controllable costs. Only Reeves Community Complex was in a negative budget position. But when the Civic Center is taken into consideration, as they share the same staff, the arena budget variance was positive. Overall, the year-to-date budget versus the actual net variance in Parks and Recreation was positive by $586,000. Now we're going to look at the 2021 budget. And this is for parks, and these are the notables. So user fee revenues have significantly decreased, and PPE and sanitation has increased. There is an increase to the third-party playground inspections, which will assist in injury litigation or mitigation of potential litigation. The park shop at Cowan Field is now operating, and electrical costs will need to be financed in this budget. And then the last change to the parks budget lines is due, and this is really one of the biggest impacts that you'll see when you go through it line by line, is that Cowan Fields has been consolidated with the rest of the budget. So a lot of the full-time staffing and material staffing is spread throughout the other budget lines. This is also the case with the Terry Fox budget lines, and they've either been eliminated or consolidated. And again, therefore, some of the full-time staffing and equipment budget lines you'll see do have an increase in them. However, no new full-time staff have been budgeted for parks. On the rec side, the largest change to the recreation budget is the assumptions of revenue across all the sectors. Recreation staff, in a normal year, this is a challenge due to the fluctuation. With COVID and not knowing what level we're going to be in, it makes it even harder. However, staff have estimated, based on their own sectors, a growth between 20 to 25% each quarter. However, this first quarter starting basically at zero. But hopefully getting closer to more normality in the fourth quarter with regards to revenue and participation. Now, this final slide in the presentation, given the current circumstances, I would have liked to have come before council with no asks for consideration of additions to the base budget. However, the forestry department believes, left unchecked, the invasive species will become a much bigger, more expensive and destructive problem next year. This addition to the base budget will be used to help in the mitigation of two invasive species. The first, gypsy moth, that we would need to spray Petula woodlot, and the other is the Phragmites issue, which takes hold inside our wetlands and chokes out all the diversity and all native plants, leaving the wetlands susceptible. So that is my presentation. And
thank you. Questions of council? Councillor Accioni.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Connors, just, I know this year's been really odd, so bear with me. I think I know the answers to some of these, but if I could, on page 51, just notice the expenditures for vacation pay, sick pay, and stat pay. Significantly higher than planned, but yet we're not planning for that for 2021, and I'm just curious why.
Your Worship, through to the councillor's question, one of the things that we did in 2020 when we closed the arenas and the aquatics facilities in the spring, we brought them over to the parks facility. So there's a lot of full time that got moved over for those few months, and that's the with that comes more sick time, more stat, more everything, and I think that's why you see those numbers heavy there.
Yeah,
anticipating that won't happen this year, though.
Yeah,
Fingers
just the
crossed.
6 pay really surprised me at 20,000 forecasted, but 96, almost $97,000. So that was quite.
Yeah, the other issue too is in the Parks Department, it's a very physical job, and if you're not used to it and you're older, there's some breakdown that happens.
Okay. All right, I'll let you go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schadenberg.
Thanks. A question also to Brian. I guess maybe the first question is more of clarification than anything else, because it was something we had passed the council a few months ago. Just to clarify, when you talk about Terry Fox, it's the Terry Fox Memorial Track at College Avenue Secondary School, but the city's relationship with the school board is changing in 2021, is it not?
Your worship, through the councillor's question, yeah, basically we were going in there and we had an agreement, a tri-party agreement, and we've given notice that we are not going to be involved in that agreement. We're hoping that the other two parties continue with the agreement, but because we built the multi-purpose field that football can use, that was really one of the reasons that we kept the Terry Fox agreement, and once we put our money towards that, we didn't think it was necessary to do both.
Thank you. Continue, Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I noticed you don't have Glennis Hill hanging out in the background behind you there, Brian, but my question would be is, I noticed in 2020, the budget for revenue for income for picnic and pavilion rentals was $9,000, and you far exceeded that, over $12,000. Any reasons why that would be in the year of social distancing that you would go so much higher, but it's 9,000 again for this coming year for the same line?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, I believe it is specifically because of the social distancing and the pandemic. I think a lot of people took their social gatherings outside and into a picnic pavilion type atmosphere where they could spread out and be outside and safe, rather than having indoor gatherings. So I think that's directly because of the pandemic measures.
Go ahead, continue, Councillor
One
Schadenberg.
item Brian Connors and I talked about earlier by phone was sort of make good advertising on things like boards and at the arena and issues like that. Maybe give people a background on some of those type of items to sort of say, well, obviously the traffic in the arenas is a lot lower, and as you talked about earlier, the eyes on the boards are a lot less, therefore.
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, yes, right now we still have advertising in our arenas. However, when we have closed the building, so no one was allowed in there, those months, what we're doing is just tacking it on to the end of the contracts for arenas and boards, if that is the councillor's question.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Talbot.
Your worship, are we going on the pages now or just still on the presentation?
Yep, we can go with the presentation, and we can start into detail on the pages as well. So,
Okay, because mine was on page, I'm starting on page 52. I had a question.
go ahead.
Is that okay? Thank you. Mr. Connors, the clothing and uniforms, is that because we didn't have the summer staff? It was estimated at 5,000. We didn't use any, and this year it's 12,900.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, you are correct. We had fewer students because every time we moved over a full-time staff from the arenas and aquatics, we couldn't hire 2 students. However, we're planning on having the appropriate number of students this year, with the increase also in the PPE that we'll need as well.
That comes under clothing and uniforms and the PPE?
Just check.
Or would that be safety equipment, wouldn't it? Or
Yeah, it is under the clothing and equipment, and there is, it falls under clothing and equipment here.
Can I continue, your worship, or would you prefer to go each page, or?
Nope, go ahead, continue.
Okay. I had another question, and it actually comes up in more than one line or more than one area. There seems to be an increase in a lot of vehicle operating expenses. Can you, and it's not just the one line, it's in quite a few. Is it the gas, or what seems to be the increase?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, this is in order for us to continue to fund our equipment for the long term, so we're not having a deficit. When we purchase equipment, we've got to make sure that we have the full life cycle of it, and we have been running in a deficit in this area. So this is has always been to try to make sure that we can fully manage the equipment deficit in parks long term. The other piece that you'll notice why it's gone up is because it used to there used to be equipment costs sitting inside Cowan Fields and the Terry Fox accounts that are now closed to zero, so they had to get moved out. And this is the same with the full-time staff. You'll notice that it's up in a lot of areas. Same thing here is with equipment. We had to move that equipment cost that were spread out into consolidated into different accounts there.
Okay, thank you. And my last one is regarding the floral displays equipment charges. It's not for the material, it's for equipment. So are we getting new equipment for our displays, or?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, this is the same reason. This is with both Terry Fox and Cowan Fields.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lauder.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Mr. Connors, on page 52, under the parks conference and training, it was 15,000 was in last year, and 15,000 in again for 2021, and there was only 36,85.93 spent last year. Is that why would be the big amount again this year, since we're still in COVID? Just wondered.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, the reason why it was down so much, you're correct, is the COVID. However, there are several training courses that the Parks Department is looking to take, but they have now moved to online for a lot of those training courses.
Okay. And the next, can I keep going? It's all on the same page. On
Go
the
ahead, Councillor.
The electricity has gone up to 68,100. Is that from 28,000? Is that combining some other, the Cowan Park or something?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, the increase in the electrical cost is due to the new Cowan Fields shop. And it would also be the consolidation of all the Cowan Fields. So the lights, all the lights that were budgeted for at Cowan Fields, the 3 ball diamonds, that those electrical charges are now moving over. So it's not an increase, it's a consolidation.
Okay, thank you. And with the likewise with the water, would that be the same? It's up 51,760.
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, yes, it is the same.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of council? Okay, then we'll move along to the arenas. So pages 59 to 60, and again 71 to 73. Any updates on the Craft Hockeyville nomination from the community?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, I have not received any updates. I'm not sure if the other councillors have.
And Councillor Talbot?
Are you looking for questions? Okay, thank you. Over page 72, the Southwood Arena memberships, is that for all of staff? Or is that something particular? It's gone up $900.
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, the memberships would just be for the arena staff to keep their OFRA memberships in good stead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of council? Councillor Lauder?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Mr. Connors. I just was looking at the gym club, and it's just more of a question. Are they able to conduct any of their, is that program able to be operating once now that we're out of a little bit of the COVID?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, are you referring to the walking track around?
No, the gym club, the at the down at I assume down at the complex.
Oh,
yeah, on page 71. I'm sorry.
It's okay. The gymnastics club has a separate entrance, separate washroom, and is on a separate system than the rest of the building, so it would be able to open. However, much like each of our hockey rinks, in red, you would only be limited to 10 people in that part of the building at one time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do we still charge them the full rent though, that they were?
Your worship, through the councillor's question, we would be in red. In the lockdown where the building is closed, that would probably be looked at. They haven't requested that, but we would certainly look at that.
Okay. And just one more question. On page 72, provisions for complex occupants trust. What is that?
Okay. 72.
It's on page 72.
And this is?
That's the fourth one from the bottom.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, this is 0704.
Yes.
Is that it? This is good. One of our Good Beginnings, the daycare. They pay us some funds, and that goes for a roof inside a roof repair trust.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of council? Okay, seeing none, we'll continue to move along. So aquatics, page 61 to 71, or 61 to 67, sorry. Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Connors, running summer camps has probably become, again, on the COVID-19, a very difficult thing to do when you start looking at participant to teacher ratios. It's going to be difficult for you to be able to predict what's going to be coming this summer.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, you're correct. If the COVID restrictions are lessened and more people feel comfortable having their kids go to summer camp, we'll probably have a fairly good camp. However, if the restrictions are tightened or if there's still a real concern throughout the community, we might end up with a very small camp program this year.
Thank you. further questions? All right, thank you very much for your presentation. And let's see, so next up, we'll move on to administrative services. And that's pages 1 to 13 back at the beginning. And tonight we'll have Diane Campbell, our Deputy Treasurer, will provide the presentation and go over any questions of council. Welcome.
You're welcome, or thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm pleased to present the Treasury Admin Services, debt grants, and the miscellaneous building section of the budget tonight. And following my presentation, Chris Gratton, our IT manager, is going to do a brief presentation on the information technology section. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, and I think I'm good to go. Okay, so our first slide is a pie chart representing the revenues that the city is going to generate in 2021. It's a little bit different this year. Typically, the revenue is around 73% of taxation, but it's slightly reduced this year from previous years. And there's a couple of reasons for the changes in the revenue categories. One of the swings is a result of a large increase in the industrial land sale budget. And as will probably be a theme throughout this year's budget talks, there's a number of revenue reductions that are directly attributable to COVID in the user fee areas, also in gaming and investment income categories. There is a slight increase in grant revenues, which is mostly associated with receiving funding from the province related to COVID recovery strategies. Specifically within the revenues in the Treasury Department, we include taxes and additional taxes, some payments in lieu of taxation, and in addition to penalty charges, grant revenues, and different contributions from reserves and reserve funds. The additional tax budget is a line that's difficult to predict from one year to the next. Their additional taxes are billed throughout the year based on supplementary tax rolls that we receive on a monthly basis from MPAC they start in May and they go through until November. We're not always sure how much assessment that MPAC is going to capture in any given year, but we have had a considerable amount of building going on within the city, as well as a number of city land sales in the past few years. So we're fairly confident that we will see an increase in our additional taxes this year. There's several areas that have not been assessed yet that we are hoping to pick up, as well as numerous new houses. We're also getting some assessment-based management assistance from consultants that we used previously to assist us with tax capping, and they help to monitor the integrity of our annual assessment roll so that we are getting as much taxation as possible. I'm going to speak more in depth later about the gaming revenues, but obviously they're forecast to be quite low because of the COVID-related closures of the facility, both in 2021 and 2020. Interest income budget's been decreased to reflect our current very low Bank of Canada rates. They're expected to continue very low well into 2022, possibly 23. Tax penalty and interest was low. The actual amount was low in 2020. Direct result of reduced and waived interest and penalty charges that were approved by council in the early days of the COVID pandemic. We have reset those for 2021 and hope things are a little bit more normal this year. With respect to the slot machine revenue, reserve fund revenue, each year we budget the previous year's slot machine revenue according to the council policy, which is allocated, as indicated on the slide, $350,000 to the Woodstock General Hospital, 15% to the community grant program, 30% is allocated to the operating budget to offset taxation, and then the balance, whatever it may be, is contributed to our capital reserves. We had a bit of a challenge for 2020-21 budgeting as a result of the closure and a considerable reduction in the amount that we received in 2020. In order to fund the typical program, what we ended up doing was calculating an average over the last 4 years of the amount received. And then we used that We used that and applied the council policy to that number and funded the shortfall from the Safe Restart grant money that was provided by the province. This includes the allocation to the FAIR program as well, which we've reduced by 50% in 2021, just based on anticipated reduced number of offerings. And it's worth noting that this is year 19 of the 20-year commitment for the hospital building campaign, so we are almost through with that commitment. In terms of expenditures, what we include in the Treasury section are expenditures that are not directly attributable to specific departmts. Boundary adjustment payments continue to increase. We're paying now Norwich, East Oratavistock, Blandford, Blenheim, and Southwest Oxford in perpetuity based on various annexation agreements that have been signed over the past number of years. These payments at this point account for approximately 2% of the expenditures in this budget as presented. The charitable rebates remain consistent from one year to the next. We're not anticipating any big changes in 2021. The grants are paid out upon submission of a completed application to charities that rent properties at a commercial tax rate, and the rebate's worth about 40%. The Community Improvement Program, that continues to be quite a popular program. There are several components to it, and we generally provide grants for a portion of expenses that are incurred on the project, sometimes permit fees and also tax-back grants. There's a number of approved applications that have not been finalized over the last few years, and as well, the budget numbers will include projects that are in progress and aren't completed, as well as an estimate of what we might expect for 2021 that could be approved and completed all in one year. And that program is entirely funded from the Downtown Reserve Fund. Tax adjustments, they include various reductions for assessment appeals, rebates, vacancy rebates, and other tax adjustments if we do an application based on a damage from a fire or demolition. 2020, our adjustments were very high. We came in almost 25% over budget. Again, this year, like in the last couple of years, we've been dealing with a number of multiple year settlements, which is getting quite expensive. Looking forward to 2021, we continue to have a number of multi-year property appeals that are still outstanding, and one in particular that could have very significant consequences to our budget. It's currently scheduled for a settlement hearing in late March, although I'm not sure that it will settle at that time. We are hopeful that we will get some of it at least resolved this year so that the uncertainty can be at least a little bit alleviated. We're asking for quite a large increase in this budget line this year, $2.2 million, in an attempt to increase the funds we have available to finance these appeals as they settle. And then any budgeted dollars in the account that are not used to finance current year adjustments, we'd be contributing to the tax reserve so that we have the funds available in the future. In 2020, in anticipation of what was going to become this COVID pandemic, we set aside $750,000 of the 2019 surplus in order to offset some of the expense that we expected we would be spending. While the budget line looks underspent, a lot of there's a lot of different expenses interspersed throughout the operating budget, such as patron screeners at facility entrances. Their wages end up in the department where they're working, so there is certainly a considerable amount of expense associated with the pandemic. With respect to the reserves and the reserve funds, they're quite similar from previous years, although there were a few changes made partially to help contribute to the tax adjustment reserve. Those changes were noted at the council meeting last week. And then we've also increased the salary reserve as as Mr. Crooks had mentioned, the inside and outside collective agreements are being negotiated this year. And we also settled the fire contract last year, which we were required to use this reserve to help fund the retroactive increases. And we will have a list of the up-to-date reserves and reserve funds available shortly. We're still working on finalizing our 2020 balances at this time. With respect to our specific department downstairs in administrative services, we certainly stay busy every day with the various functions that we do: taxation, accounts payable and receivable, and payroll, and also managing the city's database of assets with currently a net book value of $206 million. Included in our budget this year, we were successful in obtaining a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for $50,000, which we're going to put towards fees for a consultant to update some of our building information. We've got a couple big asset management plan requirements in 2021 and 2023, and this one will help satisfy some of the requirements for the 23 plan. We've also included a little bit of revenue within our department for some tax information requests that we were getting on a regular basis. It was included in the user fee bylaw in the fall. And for the most part, it's putting a price on duplicated information that taxpayers have already received and they request again. And then the last thing that we added was a little bit of money for an audit or at least some expertise to ensure we are compliant with the rules of the payment card industry. That's with respect to taking credit cards and debit cards, doing a lot more online lately, and we want to make sure that we're on side with all of our rules. And after last year's budget ask, we did have one internal staff shift, and we've moved our financial analyst to our accounting coordinator, and he has taken on some new responsibilities as well as a couple staff reports, just as a way to redistribute some of the workload within our department. In terms of achievement, while we were still solving the remaining cyber issues last year, we dealt with the mid-March fire to the building next door, which briefly put us out of our office, and then immediately following, there was a citywide shutdown of all the facilities due to COVID. Despite that, it being an unusual year, sorry, I might have slipped a slide there. Despite that, we did manage to have some achievements in 2020 that we're willing to share. We did operate without two of our full-time customer service staff for a number of weeks that we were closed in the spring. We had several staff members working from home. We faced challenges just like any other organization in finding alternative ways of doing business, and we kept while keeping our staff safe. And we did have tax collection at the end of May. Despite being closed to the public, we were able to do not too badly in that regard. We also launched our new capital budget software, which we used in the budget that we just had passed, and we will continue to streamline this project and improve the reporting into 2022. And we're now working on the operating budget software, same product or same company, and we plan to use that for the 2022 operating budget. And we were able to get our electronic pay stubs re-implemented, which was they were a victim of the cyber incident. In terms of goals for 2021, first and foremost, we have to get our asset management plan for core assets completed and presented to council, hoping to have that available in the late spring, as deadline is 1st of July. Included in the bylaw budget is a new parking ticket system, and we'd be very happy to help them to get that up and running so that on our end, when we do the payment side of it, it's much more integrated with their information and improve the experience for the person with the ticket. We also like to update and improve our portion of the city website, finding through this whole experience of having to deal so much online that we certainly have room for improvement in the website, and we'd like to make it more user-friendly. As of the 2021 interim tax billing, we did finally get our tax bill e-send operational. It hit a few roadblocks along the way, but we will have the sign-up forms available shortly on the website and at City Hall for people who would prefer to receive their tax bill by email rather than snail mail. And finally, we'd like to assist in doing some automation of cash receipts at engineering, because there's a little bit of duplication of work going on with the deposits. With respect to the debt of the city, at the end of 2020, our outstanding principal was just slightly over $15,400,000. We're anticipating issuing another 900,000 in 2021, and that combined with what we issued in 2020, which was 1.65 million, 800,000 for roads and 850,000 for engineering, will put our debt at 14,420,000 after taking into account the payments that will be made in 2021. The breakdown of the outstanding principal is shown in this chart, and just in terms of percentages, it's roughly 43% for roads, works, and engineering, 37% for police and fire, and about 15.5% for rec and culture, and the balance is in industrial land purchase. In terms of the grant, basically covered off most of the grant budget within the slot machine discussion, but there is a net expenditure at the end of the grant section, and that's $95,000 that was approved to be provided to Southgate Centre in 2015 and on an annual basis, and it is not financed by the slot machine grants. The Naval Veterans property remains in the grant section for now, although there's discussions in the works that potentially it's going to be afforded the same treatment as the Legion properties, and it will become exempt. But for now, we'll leave it in the grant as it's been returned on the roll as taxable. And then the other buildings, it's going to be quite a change in the other building section of the budget this year. A number of the properties will cease to be rented in 21, including the Dundas Street properties. The Hydro building is already empty, and the Market Centre will be, the west end of the Market Centre will be empty by the end of March 2021. We're looking at options for those buildings. United Way continues to rent the art gallery, and they're currently in working on a new lease. And then we also put some charges in here for general heating, roof, and mason repairs on various city buildings that are financed from the municipal building reserve. In terms of additions to the budget, we have one ask in 2021, and we are looking for funding for a part-time tax clerk. As the city grows, our volume is just increasing, and we're finding it very difficult to get everything done. We're experiencing high phone volumes and high email volumes, and all of those require a very quick response time, and they're certainly taking up staff time. There are a lot of functions that have to happen in our department with regard to billing and notifications and maintaining programs. And with this new eSend program, we're going to have to maintain a database of email addresses. And anyway, it just there's considerable amount of things that need to be done, and we're finding that we're falling behind, and we're not keeping them up as well as we should. It will, not this year, but in future years, it will or should reduce the amount of overtime that we spend in our department. Unfortunately, it's the early part of the year where our overtime is incurred, and so that's going on right now. The increase to the budget would be approximately $27,600, which is mostly salary, but a little bit of equipment and a spot to put this person, and then an ongoing cost of about $35,000 a year. So that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions for Ms. Campbell? Well, I think you did a very thorough job. So with seeing no questions, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the section on information services and IT. And there we are. Welcome, Mr. Grattan. And so this continues on in that same section, and those pages are, where are we here? It would be page 6. And there we are.
So as I go through the budget and I'm looking at some of the accounts, there is a couple of accounts that do have differences from the previous year.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna mute that. Okay, so there is 5 accounts which have overages, and the account starting from account 0312 on page 6, which is the various IT supplies and what have you. This account has been existing, but there was no funds allocated into the year previous. as we've done a lot of capital work over the last 10 months, and we are going to pursue into even more of it coming up in the next 3 to 4 months, this account will be utilized to build out some of the remote capabilities or monitoring pieces that support it. So we're building the foundation with the capital funds to do certain things, and this is going to be the monitoring pieces that surround it. The addition to account 0313, which is a growth of $5,000 from the previous year, 5,000, so it's 10,000 in total. With the growth of our department and the realigning of what we need to do as a city to address security, networking, infrastructure, et cetera, we're going to be isolating, or rather giving opportunities to some of the employees to participate in security memberships and a variety of different ones that they haven't been exposed to over the course of their tenure here. If we move down to account 0350, which is the telephone and communications, this is kind of an odd account because what we currently have throughout our system is an aging phone system that needs to be replaced. The maintenance cost going forward outweigh the value of the device itself. And with all the changes to our environment over the last year in terms of the fire, the pandemic, the remote work, et cetera, we need to find a solution that's going to be capable to push us through to any working environment that we see fit. The nice thing about this is it's a growth rate now of $15,000, but we will see a cost recovery halfway through the year when we start to eliminate landlines throughout each facility, because this uses a different type of technology. We'll actually get rid of these landlines. The next account, which is 0370, you'll see a growth of $56,000 from the previous year. And that is a result of the supporting softwares that we've implemented over the last year and the maintenance costs that go along with them. The following account, which is 0383, there is a growth of 77,990 in that account. And again, this is part and parcel to a bunch of things that we have implemented, as well as adding additional security features throughout our environment that we didn't have before, which is early testing and remediation. It also gives us the ability, or the service contracts on separate other devices that we currently have in-house. So this will be the average budget going forward for years to come. It should be pretty much stable from this point forward, with the only reduction coming in the account of 0350, the telephone and communications.
Thank you. Questions of council? We have Councillor Talbot. Go ahead.
Your worship, through to Chris. You were almost at it, but didn't quite get to it. The purchase services, it's up $5,000, and you only spent $7,300 last year.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Talbot, this is part and parcel to the third quarter build-outs that we're going to be completing. That's tied back to the capital projects.
Thank you. Questions of council? Well, thank you very much. And looks like next up we'll have our fire. So we have Fire Chief Jeff Slager joining us. And so this is pages 47 to 48. And we have a presentation. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here. We'll have fun with all this technology. All right, so for the coming year, before we kind of launch into what we have planned for 2021, we'll just do kind of a brief review of 2020. Some of the high points that we've had throughout the year here. We had the completion of our live fire training facility and some nice weather to be able to host a COVID-friendly grand opening ceremony for it. It's been a facility that we're very proud to have, and it's actually been put through its paces quite well from the time frame that we actually got it in. We've had some great training performed on that, and we're looking forward to the return of nice weather to continue on with that. In addition to our training with it, we are looking at establishing the rental capabilities for the facility. to make it available to our mutual aid partners and those outside of potentially in private industry to be able to coordinate with our trained members to utilize it to their benefit. So while, as we've said before, it won't be an immediate or a full cost recovery, we are looking to hopefully generate some income from it to be able to maintain the facility as we move forward. Throughout the year, we did have a couple of rather large-scale incidents, as one that has been alluded to is the fire that was beside City Hall. Again, kept us busy there as well as displacing a number of staff. There was also the large fire at the fairgrounds, which actually culminated in the arrest of an arsonist that we had here in the city that we were able to tie a number of other fires that our crews have been kept busy with. And again, it was fortunate to the members of the public for finding the individual and for the work with the Woodstock Police Services and us being able to get that individual off the street there. Just before Christmas, our crews were involved in a bit of a dramatic water rescue, again, highlighting some of the training that they'd gone through, ice water rescue on the Piddock Reservoir. We were very blessed to have two 11, 12-year-old boys that were able to spend Christmas with their family very safe at home. We're glad that that happened. Again, just highlight some of the high-level training that our crews go through. As with everybody else, the COVID-19 response did affect our department. The downside, we don't have a lot that we can stop doing because, again, we are in the nature of our business. We have to be out there in the public. So it did change the way that we had to go through things with respect to how we run services inside our hall. We did have to close the doors to public, but it changed the ability for us to interact with each other as well. And that limited a number of our outdoor training initiatives or outside agency training initiatives. As was previously mentioned by the other departments reporting this evening, the collective agreement arbitration award came down towards the end of 2020, and that had a financial impact on our actuals that we'll touch base on briefly as we go through there. We were also in receipt of an Enbridge Inc. grant that is coordinating through one of our capital projects with respect to our bunker gear cleaning abilities. We're very grateful for Enbridge for giving us that. And we're still pending, we're awaiting this year, hopefully a rail safety improvement grant for the predictive rail crossing data. We hopefully within the next month or two, we'll hear back on that project. Our prevention and education teams, we had a couple of are noticeable, trying to get our face out there a fair bit. On the side of the building by Museum Square, we had a very large banner drawing attention to cooking fires and that. Our prevention team's been working very hard on trying to get new ways of getting some information out and draw attention to it. Towards the end of 2020 as well, all of our day staff vehicles, part of the prevention division, were wrapped with various fire safety messages so that they can be part of a roving billboard in addition to the signage that you'll find in the bus shelters throughout the community. With COVID, it did change the manner in which our prevention and education team was able to continue with their public education. We weren't able to go out into the public, so there was a change into the online development. They developed a Google Classroom where we're trying to reach out to some of the schools, but also just have it available, some resources and that kids are going to be at home, they're going to be active on their computers, that we can get them somewhere to come and still continue to have some fire education information. They also took the time to be able to work with the City of Woodstock Web IT department and web design to update our information and bring it all through. One of the big changes, and it was kind of a positive one we saw kick off once COVID went, birthdays. People weren't able to have birthdays and they weren't outside in that. And you started to get requests that we would do a drive-by. So we saw a large increase in the Friendly Neighborhood Fire Department doing a little drive-by, giving a wave to some kids on their birthdays and that. Again, doing what we could to kind of give smiles on the kids' faces and still have an opportunity to be involved with them. A lot of our in-person programs that we did had to cancel, home smoke alarm, fire extinguisher training, again, like everything else. Anything that dealt with face-to-face training, we had to put on hold for the time being. Our prevention team were still able to, through the challenges of it, continue or complete all of our vulnerable occupancy inspections and observations. These are provincially legislated to be completed. It's no small feat to be able to do that, working with our long-term care facilities. for it. So again, great kudos to our team and for the long-term care facilities for finding ways to make it happen. They did have to have some areas with inspections we had to move to a virtual. They had a couple of them, fortunately, that may have been a lower scale one where they were able to complete it kind of through FaceTime for some smaller situations where normally we would have to be in the facility. They were able to find ways to make it work and still be viable for it. We did not see really kind of much of a change in our investigations. Our fire investigators were called out to 17 fire investigations throughout the year. We had one that was a high level that the OFM-EM was involved with. Our training saw a significant change. We weren't permitted to bring in outside agencies. This was something that was enforced or recommended throughout the OFM-EM to not bring outside agencies into the home to minimize any of the potentials for transmission or contamination with individuals. So we saw a dramatic increase in our in-house courses. One of the benefits we've been able to do is we've moved a lot into our NFPA standardized courses, and there's a listing of a number of them that we were able to complete in-house, keeping our crews on shift and in our community and available for, while they're doing education, available for responses and any needs that we would have in the community. In total with this, we had over 11,000 collective hours of training associated with just these certifications for it. So again, it's a great project that we've put forward, and it's something that we're looking at continuing on with. Underneath of the training requirements, one of the NFPA standards, 1410, that oversees the type of training that fire services need to have, has undergone a change in 2020, similar to what we're tending to see as a common trend in NFPA standards, is things are going from what is being considered recommended to now these are required. It will go kind of hand in hand with some of the future legislative changes. There were some that were brought forward a few years ago with a previous provincial Liberal government that were rescinded when the PC provincial government came in, to do with certification requirements for firefighters. 1410 lays out that foundation for it. We're fortunate that a lot of the training we've already been doing and the process we've got in place has put us in an excellent position to already be ready for that. It'll just dictate the ongoing annual setup that we need to maintain for them. Before we get into the numbers of 2021, I do want to touch base on some of the 2020 lines, looking at what we had projected in 2020 budget versus what the actuals wound up being, and hopefully maybe draw some answers for you before they come at me with the questions when we discuss the budget as to why they were the way they were for 2020. Some of the significant changes that you'll see through it is with the noted accounts here. So in our overtime account, you can tell it's hard not to hide. It was a significant overage with our overtiming. We found that when we were looking at the numbers there, the staffing and due to our COVID setup there that we had an impact with the number of people that we had off at the time that we needed to cover for minimum staffing. We did have a large portion with our incidents. So when our crews are called in on a callback, that sets up, and the costing of the arbitration would get added into that, because again, it would pay off the past 3.5 years worth of retroactive to it. When we look at our numbers, almost 67% of our overtime costs were related between incident responses and staffing coverage. And that's something that we do have a project that we're looking at dealing with for the staffing, that hopefully we can knock some of that down. As you can see, we still are planning to keep it relatively where it was last year, and hopefully we rein it in a little better. Our caretaking supplies, personal protective equipment, and uniforms accounts, those increases were all we can tie directly related to our COVID response. We're far more cleaning that would normally be going on, whereas our crews look after the stations themselves. They do a regular cleaning, but when you're going from doing a once a day wipe through to once an hour you're wiping through an entire hall, you're going to go through materials a fair bit more. Into the uniforms and the personal protective equipment, we were requiring through Southwest Public Health that our crews were in full PPE, medical grade PPE, for masking that throughout the hall. We were able to incorporate some of the additional equipment that we needed to bring in and tie it into our accounts that we already had there. The bunker gear cleaning is one that I know will be a topic of discussion, I am sure. As we had the extractors coming in, the intent was that we were going to start seeing a drop in our overall costs with this. But then the NFPA 1851 had the change that we no longer could just send the stuff out once a year for an annual inspection. It now has to go out twice a year, in addition to the regular cleaning based on day-to-day use for it. So we did see an increase there. We've addressed that in our 2021 projections there, and I'll speak more to that in a moment. So moving on to the 2021 proposed budget, a quick scan through the items that I really have no care and control over, unfortunately, here for the first part. These are directly related to wages and benefits that we've got there. You can see the differences that we have through it. We do have the collective agreement in place. It is set to expire at the end of 2021, although it was just an arbitrated award towards the end of 2020. It expires at the end of this year, and we'll be launching right into a new collective round of negotiations for that. Once we move into the further, so you can see the collective wages and benefits, the changes that we've got with respect to there. Supplies, repairs, and maintenance, the areas of the budget that I actually do kind of have a bit more control over. We've done a review of some of the areas that we can have some changes. Some of the changes are going to be one-offs, and I'll speak to them in a little bit. We were able to drop it down 1.7% for the coming year. Our dispatch, emergency reserves, emergency management, and our reserves, we've remained static on that. The reserves for fire equipment was pre-approved in last year's council pre-approved our 2021 contribution, so we didn't ask for anything more with that. Overall, we've got a 5.8% increase in our expenditures for this. When we look at what our expenditures versus the tax levy, we do find that we are still kind of in line at the roughly the same percentage for the fire department portion that we were in the 2020 budget year. In addition to our normal reserve, you will find that the provision for radio reserves, so this is the money that we set aside for the infrastructure for the radio communication system. This is not the individual portables that both police and fire and that carry. This is the heavy infrastructure in the towers and such like that. The majority of the major projects have been already funded and are nearing completion. So what we're looking at, we're able to drop our reserve contribution for the 2021 year while we start to collectively look at what the values we will need to replace the equipment that we've just kind of finished replacing in the coming years, so that we don't take a big hit at that time. We're looking at those forecastings of budgetary plans, and that'll give us a better marching plan going forward as to what we'll need to ensure we have in a reserve account for it at that time. Within the fire department budget, underneath of our base budget, the areas that we're looking at for some of our growths, some of our minor ones are the first one, caretaking supplies. COVID is still here. We're still going to be ongoing and maintaining the regular and heavier cleaning of what we've got within the hall. We've asked for an increase of $1,000 there. Subscriptions and memberships, an increase of $200. That's just a normal annual increase for data, for the setups of all the different organizations we are a part of, where they increase. Medical oversight and first aid. In 2020, we were fortunate. The review, or renewal of our first aid CPR and our naloxone program, we were given the ability to have those grandfathered. We didn't need to go through the personal face-to-face training. Our medical director was able to maintain that and continue on our training. However, we will most likely, we're forecasting that in 2021, there will have to be some return to direct medical training for our programs. With the addition of the naloxone, we are seeing an increase in the costs associated with that. So we've asked for a small increase in that account to cover those expenses. As I mentioned, the bunker gear cleaning, we are with the requirement of the twice a year for our annual required advanced cleaning and advanced inspection program. We are asking for an increase in this account. We have linked this to a decrease in another account, trying to just move money around with respect to that. We have entered into an agreement with the company that we send our gear out for the advanced cleaning and advanced inspection, where we have a 3-year commitment of a price point. So the prices that we're paying for now will be the same for the next 3 years. We shouldn't see an increase in costs associated with that. Reductions that we're looking at, mileage, again, we continue to monitor that as it goes through. The addition of a department vehicle a number of years ago reduced the number of people that need to use personal vehicles for it, and we're seeing less involvement or less use of a personal vehicle for department work. So we're, again, minimizing that where we can. Account 331, our educational courses and training. This was, when you look at the actuals from last year, because we didn't bring in a lot of outside agencies to complete the training, we didn't use a lot of that funds. We don't foresee the ability, due to COVID restrictions, of being able to have outside agencies coming in again to do this. So we have looked at, for this year, having a reduction for that account just to reflect that. However, when COVID is addressed and we're all vaccinated and we're back to the normal world, we will start to see the return of our certification requirements there without involving outside departments. So we do forecast that for 2022, we will be looking at returning to our base amount at that point. For account 393, our purchase services, we've kind of used this a reduction when we've looked at our averages of what we're using through some ability to find some reductions and some negotiation on pricings. We were able to drop some of the ongoing values that we had, or costs that we had in that account. And what we chose to do with that, the extras that were available, we moved that over to the bunker gear cleaning account to minimize the increase there. So when we look at the net increase that we actually need for that account, instead of it being $12,000, it's actually just a $10 or $2,000 increase, because we're moving it over from purchase services. Requests above base budget at this time, we have none. We are going to continue to monitor how our department goes through what we need at that point. But looking at the climate that we're in at the present time, with with funding and everything like that, we're not in a position that we feel we need to move into anything beyond at the present time. We'll continue to monitor and go from there. In that area, one of the considerations that we will be looking at and monitoring throughout the 2021 year is, as we're saying, once we receive this grant for the predictive data for rail crossings, we do foresee that we'll start to look at doing some reviews of our response times to the north side of the reservoir. This predictive data will open up another route of travel for there. This will also tie into the fact that, as we're seeing a growth on that north side of the reservoir, the growth of the city, even though we will have an additional route going across, we are still going to be faced with response challenges. And so we want to look at, as we grow, what are the challenges that we are facing? What's the potential for station locations, and potentially the future growth of the number of stations that we have in the city to be able to respond to our area that we have within this. In early 2021, this year already, the Ontario OFMEM, the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, announced that the Ontario Fire College is closing. What that basically does is it eliminates a major training center for fire departments across the province. It is one that we utilize within the Woodstock department. However, we are in the process of making changes to being able to perform a good number of that training in-house. Some of the specialized courses were not there at the present time. However, we are in discussions or looking at the early stages of potentially becoming a regional training center, an RTC, in partnership with the Office of the Fire Marshal, in which case we will be able to offer a number of courses, not just to our firefighters, but to those in the area, which could potentially lead to a small amount of income coming in. It's not a great venue, but it does bring firefighters to this area, and who knows what the spinoff can be for there, and allows us to offer maybe more courses to our own staffing that normally they would have to leave the community for. We'd be able to host them here in town. So with that, that's a rather brief overview. Each year I try to keep it shorter and respectful for you guys, but I will open up if there's any questions on that or any of the lines for the projections. I'm here.
Thank you. And questions of council. We'll start with Councillor Accioni.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the fire chief, of course. As always, great presentation, very detailed. Really just want to touch on something there at the end was the fire college closures. I just love to know what opportunities as a city we may have there if we can become a regional training center. Looking at the advantages of not only having a small income for the department itself, but who knows, maybe as a city, restaurants and hotel rooms and everything as well. So I'd be kind of interested to see where that might go if with the fire college closing. And you mentioned the Enbridge grant. So with the grant, we're still seeing an increase on the bunker gear cleaning and everything else. So is that grant just a one-time shot? So is that going to affect us years going forward?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Accioni. So I'll start with the grant first. So
Yeah.
the Enbridge grant was we married that up with the capital request for the purchase of a dryer unit for the bunker gear. So what we will in effect have is the extractors are the washing gear, the washing machines. They're specially designed for our bunker gear. They have to have, you can't wash them in too hot of water, you can't spin them too quickly. So they're specifically designed for that. At present, to dry them, we hang them to air dry, and it can take 2 or 3 days for them to fully air dry. By having the dryer unit come in that we're utilizing the grant for, again, a full set of bunker gear will be washed from dirty to clean in 2.5 hours. Now, this is just considered a basic cleaning. It's not considered an advanced cleaning. So underneath of the NFPA requirements that we have to send out twice a year, the advanced cleaning is, it includes detergents and cleansers that you have to be NFPA certified and CAN-ULC certified to be able to use, and you have specialized equipment for that. Fire services cannot achieve that. We can do the day-to-day cleaning. So when our crews use the live fire training and get their gear contaminated or dirty, they can wash them immediately, but that doesn't count as that advanced cleaning aspect of it. So the grant is the one-off for the capital project. The bunker gear cleaning will cover the costs that we've negotiated for all the bunker gear that we have to go twice a year. So we have 96 sets of, well, minimum, I think actually we have 104 sets of bunker gear that have to go twice a year at an average cost of around $100 per set to be done. So when we're doing this 208 sets of gear or 208 sets of cleanings at $100, that's where I've come up with the budgetary amount for. Okay. Unfortunately, as I said, when they made that change to the once to twice a year, it doubled it. If they'd left it the way it was, I'd be asking for 11,000.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. And are you giving considerations to any other opportunities with along with city with the regional training center? Just that kind of intrigued me.
Yeah, so Your Worship, through to Councillor Accioni, the regional training center is something that I've had kind of in the back of my head for quite some time as we've been making the move to be able to provide the educational opportunities to our firefighters in-house and keeping them here in our community. And this is one of the next steps. We were looking or considering this even before the Office of the Fire Marshal announced the college was closing. The benefits that we do have with this is it does allow a broader range of courses to be able to be hosted in our area. Again, we're just in the preliminary sets. We have to ensure that we have the area for that, but it does open it up that fire services, you become part of a standard calendar and that you set what courses you're planning to run. Other fire services can send their firefighters to us here. And it might work better for agencies that may be looking, down in the southwestern area, Windsor, Essex, and that, rather than them sending, 7.5 hours up to Gravenhurst as they normally would. They're 2.5 hours to Woodstock to stay over. And, they will be maybe staying in some of the hotels, taking part in some of the restaurants and that sort of thing. We'll see where it goes. Anything where we can bring people in and we're able to educate them, it's going to be a benefit for us. So it is very early on, but we're hopeful.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions of council? Well, thank you very much. And we'll continue moving along. We have our last presenter, the CAO, David Creary. and he'll be going over our planning services as well as his office. And I know we have it in the order there. I'll let you choose the order, but we're finishing fire. The next pages are planning on 49 and then CAO on 93. And you have your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. You have me to finish off the agenda for this evening, and fortunately, it is 2 single-page budget sections, so very brief pieces to get through to the end of the agenda this evening. We'll start with the CAO budget, page 93. Very little change happening here in this particular budget. The wages include the CAO and shared cost of the senior administrative assistants to the CAO mayor. I guess the biggest material change in the budget this year is in the form of legal fees. And there's an increase of $15,000 in legal fees over $2,000 last year, primarily related to the increase in the appeals of planning applications, as well as the cost of the inter-community transit application to the Superior Court. At this point, and we'll see this also in the planning budget when we move to it, I believe we're at 5 LPAT appeals now for 2 Committee of Adjustment decisions and 3 zoning city council decisions. And all of these LPAT appeals relate to planning matters where the decision of the committee or of council is contrary to the recommendations of the county planning staff. And in each of the 5, I've been able to retain professional planning services to support the decisions of either city council or the Committee of Adjustment. So in this particular section, there's expected additional legal costs associated with these hearings. The first of which, Pebble Beach Court, is scheduled for June. If there are any specific questions in the CAO budget on page 93, Your Worship, I'll ask that those be asked at this point before we move on to planning.
Thank you. Questions of council? Okay, I think we can keep moving on to planning, page 49. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. Similarly, in the planning budget, the single largest change is in the form of legal services. That's actually professional planning services in this case. There's a $20,000 increase over last year, bringing it to a total of $30,000. This is the cost of retaining professional planning services to defend these decisions. Fortunately, we've been able to mitigate that by a transfer from a legal fees reserve to help offset that cost this year. The balance of the expenditures in the planning budget are essentially invoices that are sent to the city from the county planning department for the various costs of administering city planning matters on our behalf. And there's no other city cost in that. The one exception is the application fees, and that would be when the city would be in need of making an application, a planning application to the County of Oxford for a matter that would be under their jurisdiction, such as an official plan amendment or a plan of subdivision for an industrial park, for example. And that's where we'll see those kind of costs expensed. And if there are any questions, Your Worship, I'll take those now.
Thank you. And we'll start with Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, thanks. My question from the mayor through David Curry. It's more of a timing question, and David, maybe give people who are watching this, and obviously I'm asking the question myself, so I don't really know the answer to it. What's sort of the game plan for any kind of a future official plan amendment for the County of Oxford versus some sort of change therefore on what the provincial policy statement is coming up with for 2020? obviously people are going to be asking why are we having all these appeals when they just wanted to know when the next official plan amendments may occur within the County of Oxford.
Your worship, through to Councillor Schadenberg, the reason for 3 of the appeals that have been before City Council relate to residential intensification within established neighborhoods. And the other 2 Committee of Adjustment matters do not share a common foundation. The Planning Department, as directed by Council, is in the process of preparing a report on residential intensification. We did have a overview discussion with them last Friday on that topic, and they are pulling the report together to report to Council on how to move forward to align our official plan and our zoning bylaw with provincial planning policy that directs that we introduce more residential intensification within our established neighborhoods. So how can we find a balance that doing so will not cause great disruption to our existing neighborhoods? And that's a tricky thing, and it's taking some time. They are working on it, and we expect something will be coming to Council in that regard soon. And out of that will likely come recommendations as to where we go with respect to amending the official plan and the zoning bylaw. But it's any specifics in that area would be speculative.
Continue.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up and just a comment, David, very good explanation on how that all works, because a lot of people are asking me questions about all-pat hearings and zonings and all this stuff and official plans and whatnot. So that's a very good explanation as to how the system works. Thanks.
Thank you. And further questions? Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Creary, the reduction in the telephone service, is that because of the new phone service going in? We're just anticipating it will cost half?
Your worship, through to Councillor Talbot, unfortunately, in putting this budget together, we're not working with great information, because these are simply costs that come from the county. They end up invoicing them very late in the year. So this would be more of a reason of when I'm putting the budget together in the latter part of 2020, I'm looking at what the actuals year to date are and comparing them to where we were in prior years, and not realizing that county planning staff are across the street preparing invoices to send to us. And so I think that's likely what happened here.
Okay, and also advertising, we only budgeted $1,000 and $1,800 was spent, but we're only budgeting $1,000 for this year. Should we not maybe have increased that to $2,000, or are we not expecting the same amount of applications?
Your worship, through to Councillor Talbot, yes, we're expecting a consistent number of applications. Again, this is something that is invoiced from the County Planning Department. There is great variation in this. Advertising in this sense is probably more related to when the city does a comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw, and we can't send notices to every property, so we have to publish a notice in the newspaper to meet the public notice requirements of the Planning Act. Something like I expect, which would have happened this year, is Council directed the zoning bylaw be amended to make changes to how we treat recreational vehicle parking in residential neighborhoods. And that takes a comprehensive amendment to the zoning bylaw. It triggers a zone change application as well as an advertising requirement.
Okay, so and then supplies would be the same idea. We only budgeted $2,500, but almost $5,000 was spent. So again, that's just another.
That is, yes, your worship, through to Councillor Talbot, that is county planning invoicing the city for supplies. And I don't recall it ever being that high before.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none. Okay. Just as a reminder for council, if you have ideas or suggestions on motions that you.
Oh,
might
Your
need-
Worship, Your
Oh,
Worship.
you've
excuse me,
got
Your
your
Worship.
summary here. All right, downtown
Sorry,
street.
sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a couple more items before we bring it to a close. Sorry, Your Worship. There are two additions to base budget that that I would put under my realm. And the first is the Downtown Streets Canadian Mental Health Association Peer Outreach Initiative. This was brought to council for consideration as an addition to base budget in 2020, but it was not approved. At that time, it was a different service provider. It was the Oxford County Clinic that was providing the support for that. And at this point, they're not able to do that this year. So I reached out to the CMHA and they put together the proposal. There's a detailed explanation of that proposal in your budget preamble. But just to cover it very briefly, it's an estimated cost of $80,000 to provide peer support coordinators about 50 to 55 hours per week on the street. And the intention of these peer support coordinators would be to support downtown business owners who struggle with how to interact with people who are challenged on the streets, either with homelessness or with addictions, as well as to help directly those who are experiencing those difficulties, as well as helping downtown business owners, merchants, residents with sharps disposal. And so if council will recall, this was something that was included in the downtown development plan. And I believe it is something that the downtown would request of council as a priority for implementation, and hopefully get it up and running before the better weather returns. So if there is one further, so if there are any questions on this, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Atfioni.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Curry, I'm quite pleased with this. Actually, when I saw this and read it, there's no question. I think everybody within the city knows that it has to be addressed, and using CMHA is a natural, in my opinion, being so close to downtown. And just really want to say thank you for putting this together. And I know there's been a lot of planning behind the scenes for this, so just really wanted to show my support. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Worship, to Mr. Creary. I think it's a great idea because, I mean, every time you talk to someone who's downtown, the same discussion is on everybody's lips, I guess. It's not a concern, but I'm just asking because I know that there are other programs going through community health and that we're not duplicating something like this. Came out of the discussions of the group that we have, or how did this came from us? This is just us doing it?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Talbot. It did come out of discussions with the Downtown Homelessness Working Group, which is a variety of individuals from different organizations: Woodstock Police, CMHA, the clinic,
United Way.
United Way, the Refuge. There's a variety of participants in this working group. So this was certainly a discussion. It's certainly supported by that working group. And in terms of duplication, the Oxford Clinic has since last year introduced the mobile bus. And I've forgotten, I discussed the bus. There's a reference to the name for this. And so in terms of duplication, that would be the only duplication where they do have a mobile bus. I'm not sure what the hours are, but the mobile bus is countywide. And so it is not downtown specific. And so that particular service is not something that can be relied upon to focus and concentrate on the downtown. And so if that is the wish of council, then there is no duplication.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So with this, and because of the working group that we do have, is there a larger opportunity available to us using or getting help from Community Health or United Way to even add to this? Or, you know, I don't know if one coordinator is going to be enough for what we need. So is there an opportunity for them to join us and say we have two coordinators, one for each side of the road? I don't know, like I just, you know, want to make sure that if there's other opportunities where we can add this and make the program or the outreach larger, that it would be available.
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Talbot, it's certainly something that I can raise with the working group. I know United Way is providing funding support for the mobile bus, as well as other initiatives. So how far their ability to fund will reach, I think it's a good question. I'm not sure. Certainly, you know, the County of Oxford would be a wonderful partner to help augment this program, given that homelessness is within their sphere of jurisdiction as well.
Well, I think the more people we can get on board, and like I said, the more people maybe out there helping, maybe we can get a better handle of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of council? All right.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. The final recommendation for addition to base budget is under the service delivery review. There was discussion with the partner area municipalities to partner on a study to determine whether or not there were any service improvements or cost efficiencies to be found by devolving the county road maintenance, the maintenance services of county roads to the area municipal road departments. This is, for the most part, what happens within the city of Woodstock now, and we think it works well. And so it would be whether or not this works on a county-wide scale. So this, I think there's still some question as to whether or not this will proceed. County Council had received the report on the service delivery review, and the outcome of that is that the CAOs will get together and discuss next steps. That meeting has been set. It's sometime in March. And so I think this will be a discussion along with other recommendations that were provided in the service delivery review. So I think it's fair to say that one way or another that there is an interest to pursue the recommendations where they make sense in the service delivery review. So approval of funding for some work makes sense, even if the roads does not move forward. At this point, we're recommending this be funded from the contingency reserve so that it doesn't impact the tax levy. It's possible that this could also be funded from the recent announcement from the province on the municipal modernization program if all of the area municipalities unite and move forward with the recommendation. So I think there's questions here, but I think there's sufficient evidence of desire to move forward with something that I provided it to council as an addition. And with that, Your Worship, that is the end of my presentation. I will return the screen back to normal. And we will email council the presentations that you received this evening. We will post those presentations on the city website. It may not be until tomorrow. Some of these presentations are rather large, so we have to distill them down in size before we can handle them. We have on deck on Thursday, City Clerks, Economic Development, the Woodstock Museum, Engineering, Public Works, and the Council budget. The art gallery, police budget, and Woodstock Public Library will be heard at the Woodstock City Council meeting on March 4th. And as indicated in the budget preamble, this budget is not a normal budget. It was a very dynamic budget to put together. There, even to this day, there are potential changes afoot, and one of those is the discussion of partnering with Southwest Public Health for the mass immunization clinic. Staff are working on a report for council for the meeting next week under Parks and Rec Director Brian Connors. There is a potential financial implications of our assistance in helping to bring that mass immunization clinic to Woodstock and the county, and something that will have budget implications. And so even as we consider the budget over the next 3.5 weeks, the reality is that things are even changing even during this period of time. And so as always, if you have any questions about any of the material that was covered, please don't feel free to reach out to the department head with any questions at any time. And that will be it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Well, thank you. And we'll see everyone back here again on Thursday, the 25th, same time, 5 p.m. We'll have our live Zoom meeting with the continuation. And again, looking for a motion to adjourn. We'll go Councillor Fraser, second by Councillor Accioni. All those in favor?